Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sara Rosette.
And I'm Jami Albright. And this week on the show we have
Katlyn Duncan.
Yes, we do. And it was a very fun interview. And I did it by myself.
I know, I was going to say, and I wasn't there. I really wanted to talk to Katlyn, but apparently it was a great interview.
Yeah. But it was really fun. She's really smart and super interesting. I was nervous because, I need my podcast wife to do things with. But
that's how I feel too.
I was a big girl and I handled it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and y'all talked about, I wanted to talk to Katlyn just to hear what she had to say about traditional rights revision. So y'all talked about that, right?
Yeah. She got the rights back on some of her books, and she's just really smart, and she's like just super persistent.
Yeah. So cool. Mm-hmm. And then let's see, what else did y'all talk about?
YouTube for authors. And then she wrote quite a few books. I can't remember the exact number, but it was a lot.
Okay, cool.
In the beginning, yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Beginning of her career. So we talked about that and kind of where you can find work. And if you're interested in that, how you can get into it and stuff. So,
yeah. Cool. Well, that is all very interesting. I'm looking forward to listening to it.
Yeah. It was good.
Yeah. All right. So what's been going on with you this week?
Oh, well, I've been in COVID quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
So not much. Not much.
But are you out of quarantine now?
Not quite. I tested negative today, but I still have 2 more days before it's been 10 days. Okay. So I can't go to the hospital or anything to see my sister until the 11th day. And, but I'm symptom free. I've been symptom free except for the cough. Since I guess, what's day? Saturday? Since I guess Thursday. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, Wednesday, because I really have felt fine for most of the time. I just been a little tired, and I think I said on the last podcast I was a little swimmy headed, and so yeah, didn't we talk about it on the last podcast? Yeah, I thought we did. Shoot, I can't remember. I had COVID
all the days
before I got COVID, and now I've had COVID. So I haven't really done much. I've watched some shows, and just laid here thinking about the book that I need to write next, and figured out quite a few things. I still have kind of a major thing to figure out, but I'm not really stressing over it. I was just laying here and it came to mind. And so I followed the thread, but I'm not like forcing myself to do that. But that was encouraging because I haven't really had any ideas. But it's probably good that I was forced to just do nothing but be by myself, and lay down for almost 10 days. Yeah.
Because you've had a pretty busy and stressful.
Yeah. I've been burning
last
it
month
at
or
both
two.
ends. Yeah. I've been burning it at both ends. So, so that's how I'm choosing to look at it. But I have felt like dead weight around here because, my sister really wants somebody with her at the hospital all the time. And actually, good news, she got moved to the rehab hospital where they're getting her ready to come home. And she's doing great. And the treatment she's on, the doctor says, working great. And so that's all good stuff. But, one of my sisters just texted and said, we need another sister. We're all trying to figure out who can be there when. And with me being out, that really left a hole because, they're working during the day, and they're, got families in town. And so I've abandoned mine and so no, but it should hopefully in the next week or so, she should be able to come home. So
Yeah. Well, that's good news. I'm so glad to hear it.
News. Very, very good news. I mean, she's still really, really sick, but she's just not as weak as she was. So, so that's good. And she's a little bit of her old self. She was complaining. She's very sassy, my sister.
I just can't imagine that, Jami.
And she's just sort of let them do whatever they wanted to do. And she got upset because the nurse came in and kept moving her every 2 hours. And she was like, listen, I'm not getting bed sores in 2 hours. Stop. And so that was kind of her usual personality. And she's laughed a little bit because actually, I think she's funnier than me, but, and she hadn't had much of a sense of humor.
Yeah.
So she's a little bit more herself. So
that's good. Well, that is good.
Yeah. So we'll
that's
see
good to
how
hear.
things go.
Yeah.
But what's been going on with you? You're still living it up in Colorado.
Still vacationing, still hiking, and just having a really good time. And I am getting some work done. I mean, it's like not a priority, but I'm getting some new words in and doing some stuff on the Kickstarter. And I realized that I don't know that you can start promoting it too early. But I was thinking I would start it in September. And then I was like, oh, Labor Day. So I probably want to wait until after Labor Day. So I'm going to slow roll. Yeah. Because they recommend contacting your audience once a week for 4 weeks before you launch to kind of build.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, wait, I've started this too early. So it'll actually be fine because I usually only email my list maybe once or twice a month. And so that way, instead of just all of a sudden emailing them like all the time, I can kind of work into it. So working on that, and that's going really well. I feel like there's not much to do now except just kind of wait and get things going. But I'm kind of fine tuning all the little rewards and making sure I have everything for that. And that's about it. Not anything like no big news, but I really am enjoying this kind of partial downtime. It's really good. And
that's great.
Like you said, have a lot of ideas, and I've been able to actually get some of it down on paper. So really happy.
That's great.
So
that's good. Really good. Yeah. I'm kind of jealous. My husband and I mean, we haven't really been on a vacation together. And except if you count Disney, which
well, I don't know that you really count.
As fun as it was, it's not really a vacation.
But you weren't alone.
So I'm trying to figure out something that he and I can do that, isn't going to break the bank, but something we can still get away and spend some time where I could work if I needed to. But right now, everything is on hold for us. So.
Yeah. Well, we've been trying to do this for years. Like this has been a goal, is like to go to the mountains for an extended vacation. And it's just never worked out. Like we had big plans and then COVID happened and we're like, oh, and then we had kids graduating. And we're like, oh, that's not going to be a good time. And then we moved. So it's finally, I hope you don't have to wait this long as we did. Yeah. Hopefully you'll get your vacation in sooner.
Right. Oh, speaking of COVID, I watched Alone Together. It's Katie Holmes, and I can't think of the guy's name, but it wasn't very good. And here's the deal. It's about quarantine. It's about two strangers that get stuck together during quarantine, which I really thought that would be a funny idea for a book or, a story. But it wasn't. It wasn't. And I don't know if it was just the story. The story to me was a little lacking, or if it was just the quarantine factor, the COVID pandemic factor, that just was like, I don't want to revisit this.
I know. It's still awfully close.
Yeah. It's too soon.
Yeah.
So, anyway, if anybody watches it and has a different opinion, you can send me an email and tell me I'm wrong. I was symptomatic when I was watching it.
So maybe not the best time to watch that movie.
It's a little bitter, but so I did watch an Agatha Christie.
Oh, what you watch?
And none. Oh, wait. And none.
And then there were none.
And then there were none. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it. It was on Acorn TV.
Okay, that's the new version, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to see that. I haven't seen that.
I was going to see if you saw it. I watched that. That was entertaining. It was really good. And so anyway, we should probably get on with the interview, but I've missed you, and I've missed interviewing people like this. And so hope we get back to it next week, I think.
Yes,
right?
I think so. So I'm looking forward to it too. It'll be good.
Me too.
Yeah. All right. Well, here is Katlyn.
All right. Welcome, Katlyn Duncan, to the Wish I'd Known Then for Writers podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Good. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Let me read your bio real quick, and then we'll jump into the questions. Katlyn Duncan is a multi-published author of adult and young adult fiction and has ghostwritten over 40 novels for children and adults. When she's not writing, she's obsessing over many television series and hanging out on YouTube, where she shares her writing process and all the bookish things. And you can reach her at her website at www.katlynduncan.com. So welcome. And which television series do you obsess over the most?
So many. Right now I'm rewatching Downton Abbey after I saw the movie.
Yeah.
It's my third rewatch. And I'm usually like, my go-tos are like The Office and Parks and Recreation and all the fun, like half-hour shows. So a lot of shows now don't really catch my attention that much. So I go back to my favorites.
The good ones. Yeah. Parks and Rec just kills me all the time. It just kills me. So tell us, how did you get into writing?
So I've always been a storyteller from a young age. I always loved to make up stories, and I loved watching movies and thinking about how the characters would react, after the movie. And like, I loved sequels and just learning more about, their stories. And as a millennial, we were sort of told, like, creativity is not a real job. So I focused on what I was good at, science, and I have 2 degrees in forensic science and biology.
Wow.
I worked for many years in a laboratory. And when the big YA boom came out, Twilight and all that, like, I sort of went from, chapter books to like James Patterson. Like there was that big gap. So I just devoured all of the books. And I saw on Twitter, I believe it was Melissa Marr at the time, had mentioned she had a full-time job. And I really loved her books. And I was like, oh, you can do both. So then I started writing and falling in love with writing again, and storytelling. And then I sort of focused on paranormal. So that's my debut. It was acquired in 2012 and then published in 2013. So that's sort of where I started really going into publishing. And that was sort of a fluke. I've never had an agent. I responded to it was Karina in the US was through Harlequin, and they did a Karina UK through Harlequin UK. So I submitted, it was digital first. So unfortunately, like, most of my books are digital that are traditionally published. I only have 2 that are paperback and audio. So that's sort of my, since 2013, I've been publishing regularly. And like you mentioned, ghostwriting as well.
Well, that's so interesting. I'm the sort of the same way. I always made up stories. I always kind of finished a story that I felt like wasn't finished, and stuff like that. So yeah, that's really interesting. So what's your definition of success?
I find this was a tough question for me, because I tend to break down like achievements when I think of success, because if I think of the huge picture, it just makes me a little bit, overwhelmed.
Yes.
And I tend to like to break things down. So I would say, most of my successes have come through as like publishing a book and then publishing the next book.
Right.
But looking ahead, I'd say if I was able to make a sustainable income, that would be very successful for me. And I really don't know at this point if like full-time author is going to be me. I would like to do it more than I do. I only work like 2 hours a day, like 4 days a week, just because of my day job. And so I'd like to keep it in my life and keep publishing. And I think creating more of a steady income would be my idea of success.
Right.
Yeah.
And everybody says the day, quitting the day job is the goal.
Mm-hmm.
But for some people, I'm not sure it's a good move. I think, and I may be one of those people, honestly. And I have quit the day job, but there are just some people that do better when they have other interests other than just writing. So
yeah, and I remember Becca Syme talking about Clifton strengths.
Yes.
I'm number one intellection, and I remember, she said it a bunch of times, and she's like, I really recommend like high intellection writers have something else.
Yes.
Because you have to sort of give that time for thinking. And I know if I was to dedicate 8 hours a day, I'd probably burn out really quickly because I wouldn't have that other.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you wish you'd known about writing and craft when you started?
So right from the start, when I started publishing, that sort of was my learning experience, like actively learning. Up front with my writing, I really feel like I knew that books were more of a team effort. Right. I sort of found my critique group after my third book was published. And I was like, oh, other people other than readers can look at your book and help you improve, and not just editors. So it was very solitary for me. I was very lonely with it, and I had no idea what I was really doing at that point. And like I said, my editor was a big help, but I'd say I wish I would have found my tribe a bit sooner because it's definitely helpful. And I think all of those early readers, whether they're beta readers like other readers or critique partners who are writers, they definitely make a book so much better. From the start.
Right. They really do. I had the same experience, and I just feel like getting somebody else's eyes. I know critique groups get a little bit of a bad rap from some people, but if you find the right one, they're golden. You know, I really feel like they're just, for me, they were one of the best things that happened to me. And so in the beginning, were all your books traditionally published?
Yes. So I lost count of how many books. So 13 were traditionally published before I went into self-publishing because I got my rights reverted.
Right. Which we're going to talk about later. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you wish you'd known about marketing then when you got your books back?
Oh, when I got my books back, or before that?
Well, before that, and then when you got your books back.
Yeah. When I was traditionally publishing, like I really wish I knew that they just don't take the book and just throw all the marketing money at it. I so many authors, even now, like I feel like it's such, well, I have to say now is a little better because they're, sort of opening up the gates a little bit at a time in terms of like transparency. But I really wish, I knew how much work I had to do and I would have done more up front. I had to pay for like all of my blog tours and stuff like that. And like I said, I didn't really have my tribe yet. So I thought that's what we had to do. And I was, gravely mistaken. So, when it comes to marketing my self-published books, I would love to know more about advertising. But, I don't know if I'm the person to do that with all the data and stuff like that. But I'm sort of, now that I have my tribe, I'm sort of making my way with marketing.
That's great. Yeah. Data is a tricky thing because I'm not good with data, but I'm pretty good at marketing. Advertising my books, but it's kind of like Becca talks about. I just kind of know if an ad's working and then I kill it if it's not. And I know enough probably to be dangerous. But yeah.
Well, you're very intuitive, I think, right? With a lot of that stuff.
Super intuitive. Yeah. And that's good and bad, because you can be wrong, I guess. So what assumptions did you make at the beginning of your writing career? And then looking back, did they turn out to be right or wrong?
I'm going to bring it back to not getting, marketing from my publisher and all that. And that was definitely wrong for me. But obviously it helped me succeed later on once I sort of got on the train with it.
Right.
And yeah, I was wrong, but I'm working hard to sort of make up for it too.
I think a lot of people make that assumption though, especially if they go try to publish, they just think, oh, well, they'll take care of that and they'll handle that, or they'll hold my hand through that. And that doesn't really happen. I've never done it, but from what I hear from most people is that doesn't really happen.
Yeah. And also like with Chad too, it's very much Frontlist. And that's something I discuss in my book is like Frontlist versus Backlist. I always, you just sort of like have to keep writing to stay up to speed. But, I had all these books behind me, and that's when I started to like question a lot of things like, hey, I'm on my 5th book. Great. But what about these books that I, wrote a couple of years ago? Like, what can we do for them? And it was, it was always like, oh, just the next book. And I totally understand that that's the way that that machine works. But that was sort of, when I started to question everything.
Right. Ironically, I think that even indie publishing kind of has been that way until recently. I feel like, especially with rapid release and all of that, it's all about that next book. And I feel like there's been a switch. Sara and I have talked about this. There's been like a bit of a switch in mindset in that now people are trying to focus more on the backlist to kind of sustain your income until you get that next book out, and capitalizing on it. Yeah. And that's always, because that's your asset, those are your assets. So I think that's always good to think about. Have you ever made a mistake that turned out to be a good thing?
I would say yes. Thinking about this question, I just always talk about it when I can, because I'm like, please don't make my mistake. But because I was with a digital first publisher, we could pump out books relatively fast. Like I could do 2 to 3 books a year. They didn't care, whatever I could do based on my schedule. Because like I said, I was working too. But I kept publishing sort of like on a whim. Like, oh, I have an idea for this story. Let's write it. And then they're like, okay, let's publish it and stuff. And that's fine. But I really jumped from different genres under one name, and it just is totally biting me now. So I would say that's my biggest mistake. But how it's turned into a good thing for me is I really found what I want to be writing. I sort of took like a really long path to that. But, sort of writing in all these different genres, I found my general themes. I found what tone I like. So I like dark toned women's issues. And then I'm sort of diving into like mental health as well, because I don't really see a lot of books that like talk about mental health for like the protagonist. That's not like a twist. It's just people live with certain things, and they can be protagonists too. And, they have challenges. I feel like I'm undiagnosed ADD. So like, I know there's a lot of challenges, and I just never really see that. So that's sort of writing all of those books sort of just pulled out the threads that I love. And now I'm just writing, other than my nonfiction, but my fiction is just like dark psychological thrillers. So I guess I can't have any regrets about it, but so it turned out to be a good thing.
Well, I love that you could kind of make that, because that is a challenge for people writing different genres under one name. It is super challenging, but I love how you can pull that all together and find out what it is you love to write. And that's great. That's really great. What's the biggest mindset change you had to make during your career?
The biggest mindset change sort of came in 2020, as a lot of people, things changed. But right before that, I was releasing my final book in one of my contracts, and I was thinking about options. So I did pretty well with two of my women's fiction books. One's a festive romance, wrapped up for Christmas, festive romance women's fiction, and the other one is Barefoot on the Beach. It's like a summer women's fiction. So I was looking ahead and just realizing, I had a big episode of like burnout, my first huge one in 2020. Like I didn't write for months. And then I was sort of like, I sort of want control. Like I want more control over this. I didn't really want to publish women's fiction anymore. I enjoyed writing it and I loved the books that I wrote, but I just really was leaning toward wanting to get an agent and writing my dark thrillers. And, I tried that whole thing, but I ended up self-publishing. But it's just the mindset of control. Like there's just so many things out of your control with traditional publishing. And while it's great, like, both indie and traditional have their pros and cons.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted, at that point in my career, after 13 books, I was ghostwriting a lot. And I was just like, I think I just need to try this other path on my own. And we'll see how it works out.
Yeah. And have you been happy with that decision? I'm assuming you have.
Yes, I have been very happy. And like I said, I did, for this book coming up in October, Her Buried Lives, I did actually query it in 2021. 2021, maybe the end of 2022, the end of 2020 and into 2021. And I had a really good response, but it was so volatile, with traditional publishing that like a lot of agents weren't getting back. They were overwhelmed, overworked, and I don't know if they knew where to fit me.
Right.
And that's one of those other things that turned out to be a good thing, is that I sort of write in genres, but like a little bit outside. Like I add that little extra something that I don't see a lot in terms of some of my books. So I just felt like it was too non-market, was not marketable in the traditional market. But indie it's like, you can publish pretty much anything, but as long as, it's published well. So yeah, my mindset change was definitely more control. And I feel really good about that decision.
Yeah. I didn't realize how much of a control freak I was until I started publishing. And again, I've never even queried or anything, but the thought of someone else making decisions about my book, it kind of makes me get that little tight feeling in your chest, that you get when right before you run screaming through the house. So I think that, it would be kind of tricky for me. So let's talk about your book. Take Back Your Book is what it's called. And it's about getting your traditional rights reversed and getting those back. So first of all, when did you decide you wanted your rights back?
Well, I've been tracking my first books. I actually have a spreadsheet of like all my books, and I track, how much they're selling and things like that. And with traditional royalty reports, like it's very broad. So like you don't get any breakdown of stores or anything. So like I was trying to promote books and I couldn't, I had hired an advertising person to help me, and she did fantastic with my women's fiction. But I just wasn't happy with what I was getting at the time. So I looked into rights reversion on my contract, and I realized my first book was up. So I just, wrote an email to the head of HQ Digital, which transitioned from Karina. And I just asked for it back, and they ended up giving me all 3 books back, because it really wouldn't make sense for me to like republish. And I wouldn't have republished until I got them all back. But I was like, oh, this is cool. So then I had the books back, and I didn't really know what to do. So then I, sort of went into self-publishing spiral and just learning everything about that. So And then talking to a lot of authors, I realized that many people didn't know about that rights reversion and, books that aren't selling. So then people were like, oh, you should, talk about this more. And I was like, huh, okay.
Yeah.
And then it's basically like the book is like half self-help, half memoir, because it's just me pouring out everything I knew about it. And just trying to reach out to those. Maybe my ideal reader for that book was basically me, like years and years ago, just trying to give all the information so you can make, a choice. And you make those choices. And then if you want to change it, with the reversion clause, you can, in the future if things change.
Yeah. I love, it says in part of the description says in this book, you'll find the basics of right reversion, what to do when with your book after you get your rights back, which I think is huge, how to republish your book, long-term considerations for your author business and backlist, and stories from authors successfully reverting and republishing their books. So if anybody's thinking about doing that or thinking they want to do that, this book definitely would be for you. We're not necessarily, that's not what we had Katlyn on today to just plug her book, but I think it's really important because a lot of people don't know how to do that. They don't know like the pitfalls of doing let's say you get 3 books back, or let's say you get 10 books back. How do you republish? I mean, that's a lot of money and a lot of things to consider. And because you can't use their covers, correct?
Usually not. Some people have asked and they usually have to pay for the cover.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it's been years, your cover is probably out of style anyway.
Correct.
But those are a lot of considerations. And it's kind of funny going from, like, I have my product creation set because I've been publishing and I know like the process.
Right.
Self-publishing was just so much. There's so many minute details. And Her Buried Lives is my 3rd self-published book. And I was still like tweaking formatting and I'm really diving into that stuff. So it's so much upfront. And, through the book, I talk about considerations like, do you want to even republish it? Is it part of your brand anymore? If you do, these are the things you should be doing. And most of the time when you get your rights reverted, that book is publishable. If it's been like 10 years, maybe there's a few things in there that aren't really, you don't talk about anymore or something like that. You can always look for content wise, but you can easily just find a pre-made cover and publish if you wanted. But there's so many options once you come out of rights reversion.
Right. What are the biggest challenges you think about getting the rights back?
I'd say the challenges would be if they say no, because sometimes publishers will. So, for instance, I have a series of like contemporary fantasy books with HQ about mermaids. So this was a 3 novella series, and I asked for the rights back, and they decided to like recover and re-release them. So they have every right to do that as the publisher because they have all the rights. So if you're really wanting those books back, that can be a challenge.
Correct.
And in the book, my friend Terry, she's talking about, I think it took her like many, many years to get her books reverted. So it just depends on, that curtain that traditional publishing is. We don't know what they're doing on their end, in the background for selling books and stuff. So I'd say the only challenge is just them saying no, but then you could also be persistent on the other end, say, okay, well, I'll follow up in 6 months. Did you deliver on what you said you were going to do? Did you recover? Did you put a marketing push? So I always feel like I can turn it around a little bit, like all is not lost, even though it sometimes feels that way.
That's great. Yeah. Squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Yes.
So they say, but also the onus is back on you to follow up and make sure they're doing what they said they were going to do, which is good practice for self-publishing since we have all the responsibility ourselves.
Yes.
So let's talk about your YouTube channel for authors. I've actually seen it and didn't know it. When Sara said that we were having you on, I was like, that name is familiar. And I looked, and I had watched it a few episodes, because I'm always like going in there trying to find out something new.
Yeah.
So how did you get started with that? What's the kind of, tell people what the premise is and what you like to give your viewers.
Yeah, I had been wanting to start a YouTube channel for years prior to starting. I was like every pre-YouTuber where you're like, I don't have the right equipment, I don't have lighting, I don't like the way I look, I want to get a haircut, stuff like that. So I had a lot of insecurities about that. And I just decided one day, I think I was watching a video that like, you can start with your smartphone or your, iPhone or anything like that. And I was like, all right, well, I'll just try it. And I had so much fun doing it. I started in 2019 and I started with writing vlogs because that's what I love to watch. I love watching other writers process. And I started there, and then I sort of leaned into some like advice videos and then interviews and stuff like that. So pretty much the premise of the channel is, my writing process and all the bookish things, because that umbrella of bookish things sort of encompasses it all. So you can find many different things up there. I talk about ghostwriting too, and rights reversion, and just seeing, actually I haven't watched my earlier videos, but I was very ambitious at the beginning, and I could slow down since then. But it's interesting to sort of chronicle my writing, my feelings and stuff, because I try to be as honest as possible without being like too negative. But there are times where we struggle, and it's not all pretty pictures on Instagram or excitement on TikTok. It's just it can be hard sometimes, so I like to try to be honest with it.
I wanted to do one, and then I started like making a list. I was like, what if I forget something? What if I give people bad advice? What if I it was like, but you're right. You should, if you want to do it, you should just do it. I mean, there's, you can always take something down if it wasn't correct or whatever. But
well, editing is great. I love editing. I sound so great at the end, but seeing the process of me is like, I was so heavily scripted in the beginning because I forget the second I look at something. And then I tried with like a teleprompter, but then my eyes were looking through this. It's a lot of trial and error, but I have to say, like, looking at myself in 2019 and now, I'm so much more confident talking to people and giving presentations and things like that. So I think, even if the videos, don't go viral, which they haven't, it's really helped me as a person as well.
Well, and you give good advice. I mean,
thank you.
You give really good advice. And so I think that's important too, because especially for newer authors or authors like who've been around for a while that are looking for rights reversion information, it's great to have that somewhere you can find it, So let's talk about ghostwriting. How did you get into ghostwriting?
So 2015, I had a child, and I was very fortunate enough to stay home. And about 3 months in, I was very bored. And I had just published a book, I think later that year. So I was doing revisions when I was postpartum, which is not recommended. I would never recommend that. No. So I was like, what can I do like to supplement some income, but also like stay creative? And I really, my publisher wasn't really publishing YA anymore. So that was like a sort of dilemma, or YA paranormal, which I was writing at the time.
Right.
So a friend of mine, Sin Balog, she's a YA writer and ghostwriter. I noticed on her Facebook, she was talking about ghostwriting, and I messaged her and I was like, what is this about? And she explained it to me. And then she helped me get on Upwork, upwork.com, which is where a majority of my ghostwriting was. And I started with some easy jobs. I didn't get paid a lot. This is like one of my other mistakes. I wrote a 35,000 word book for like $35 or $25.
Oh gosh.
I know, it was crazy, but I got 5 stars. So then I started doing some of these jobs like for really cheap, just to get my feet wet. And then I got a whole bunch of 5 stars, and I was able to like start getting those bigger, more, better paying jobs. So I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the ones that they're like, here's an outline, write the book. Versus me, because I found some of them to be very creatively draining. If I had to like think up the idea, because they'll give me like a vague premise and then outline and then all that. So I worked with them, Upwork, different clients. I had some consistent clients. Some of them I wrote like over 15 books for each. And then I went to work for Relay Publishing. And then at that point, I think it was about 3 solid years that I was doing that on top of publishing. And it was just too much creatively. And with, my child and everything and growing up and stuff, and I wanted to be there. So, but it was a great experience. And I sort of moved this past year into nonfiction for people. So that was really fun because I got to like encompass their voice and their information and stuff. So it's great. It was definitely good for me to kind of, write the book, hand it off, you're done. Versus publishing where you have to do all of the things.
Yeah. Do you think it made you better or faster as a writer?
It definitely made me faster. And I liked getting other people's feedback other than like professional editors, like, from the clients themselves. So that was a big learning experience. But I mean, on my good days, I was 6,000 words a day, every day. Which, caused a couple bouts of burnout, but but I learned my limit. I learned where I could go, where I don't think I would have known that otherwise.
That's so interesting. So if people are interested in doing this, would you recommend Upwork?
I mean, I would. I haven't done it in a couple years, but I feel like a lot of people are still on there. I guess Reedsy has some as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And you can also, put it on your website, but I was really just working through Upwork because, just in terms of pay and stuff, if someone says they're going to pay you and they don't, Upwork will figure it out. Versus like if we did it behind the scenes, it wouldn't have been covered.
Yeah. It's nice to have that middleman to make sure.
Yes. And I mean, they take their cut, you know, but it's, I just prefer that.
Well, that's great. That's great. So this has been so interesting. I really, really enjoyed this interview. So tell everybody what you think the best thing you've done to set yourself up for success has been.
Wow. Best thing I've done. I think just informing myself. More and more, like there's no ceiling to the information that's out there for publishing, traditional or self-publishing. We're constantly changing. And I feel like the more you are able to ebb and flow with the industry, I think the more successful you will be, instead of, some people who are very rigid and just do the same things. I'm sure they can be successful, but I just think even like looking into other people, like, Joanna Penn, for instance, looking into like AI and all that. And, I keep my mind open to that stuff, but, I only have so many hours in the day. But it's nice to just have that information, be able to connect with other authors. And I would say, hopefully that leads to bigger and better success.
Yeah. And I would say, not that you asked, but I would say that just listening to you, I really love how you've taken, you kind of epitomize what this podcast is about, what you wish you know. You've done things, you've learned from those experiences, and therefore that has changed a little bit of the trajectory of what you're doing for the better. Like you were writing 6,000 words a day, you burnt out. Now, you can do that, but you won't do, you don't do that unless you have to, kind of thing. And, now you wrote a bunch of things under different pen name or same pen name, but now you know exactly what you want to write. And I just think that that's being flexible and being willing to learn from things is super important too. And I think you've really done that. And I appreciate that. So,
yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. So tell us the name of the book again and where everybody can find it.
So Take Back Your Book, An Author's Guide to Rights Reversion and Publishing on Your Terms is available wide. So it's available in ebook, paperback, hardback, and audiobook.
Okay. And where can people find you?
You can find me at my website, KatlynDuncan.com. I'm sure you'll have it in the show notes.
We'll have it all in the show
because it's spelled a little different. So you can find me there. I'm on YouTube, obviously. Feel free to follow me there. And my main social platform is YouTube, but I do jump on Instagram every once in a while. And I do have a newsletter that comes out bi-weekly on my website. That's where you'll get me more often is my newsletter. Great. So if you're interested in that. Yeah. Awesome.
Well, this has been so fun. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for listening today, everybody. And you can find all the links in the show notes at wishi'dknownthenpodcast.com. Thank you to Alexa Larberg for editing the podcast and for Adriel Wiggins for all the admin. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.